"I'll do what you want, just save my daughter," begged the poor widow to his billionaire boss. "Her little girl is lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life after a factory accident no one wants to talk about. The doctors say there's one surgery that could save her, but it costs more than this struggling mother will ever earn. So she goes to the most powerful man in the city. And instead of money, he offers a deal that will cost her everything. She must live in his mansion, pretend to love him, and stay silent about a secret buried in that factory, one tied to her dead husband. As cameras flash and lies grow louder, will she save her daughter by surrendering her dignity, or will the truth destroy them both? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Daisy Lewis wiped down the last workstation of her night shift. Her muscles ached from hours of scrubbing and mopping, but she wouldn't complain. Any job that helped put food on the table was a blessing, even if it meant working while most people slept. She glanced at her watch. 5:45 in the morning. A small smile touched her lips as she thought of Lila waiting in the break room. The company's Family Day tour had seemed like the perfect solution when her regular babysitter called in sick. Blackwood Industries didn't usually allow children on the premises, but today was special. They were showing off their commitment to community with guided tours for employees' families. Daisy's throat tightened as she remembered Caleb's voice, passionate and determined, during their late-night talks about the factory. "This place could be so much better, Daisy," he'd say, his eyes bright with purpose. "The safety protocols need updating. The machinery needs proper maintenance. People's lives depend on it." That was 2 years ago, before the accident, before she became a widow raising their daughter alone. She wheeled her cleaning cart towards the break room, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Through the glass window, she could see Lila curled up on the worn couch, her favorite book open on her lap. The sight warmed Daisy's heart. Her daughter was such a good girl, never complaining about these early morning hours. "Ready to go home, sweet pea?" Daisy asked as she entered the room. Lila looked up, her brown eyes lighting up. "Mama, did you see all the big machines? The tour guide showed us where they make the metal parts." She hopped off the couch, her braids bouncing with excitement. "I sure did, baby." Daisy helped Lila pack up her backpack. "Did you finish your homework?" "Almost. The math is hard." Lila's face scrunched up in concentration. "But I kept thinking about what Daddy used to say, that numbers tell important stories." Daisy's chest tightened at the mention of Caleb. He had always made everything into a teaching moment, even the most mundane things. That's right, he did say that. They walked hand in hand through the factory floor, their footsteps creating hollow echoes against the concrete. The morning shift wouldn't start for another hour, leaving the massive space eerily quiet. Massive machines stood silent, like sleeping giants in the dim light. As they passed near a restricted area marked with yellow and black warning stripes, Daisy noticed an unusual vibration through the floor. Something didn't feel right. The sensation reminded her of Caleb's warnings about the old equipment needing maintenance. Suddenly, a harsh mechanical screech cut through the air, followed by the blaring of emergency alarms. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the facility. "Mama?" Lila's voice trembled as she squeezed Daisy's hand tighter. "It's okay, baby. We're going to—" A tremendous crash interrupted her words as one of the overhead conveyor belts gave way. Metal groaned and snapped. Daisy's instincts took over. She pushed Lila forward, trying to get them both clear of the falling debris. The force of the collapse knocked Daisy off her feet. Her head struck the floor hard enough to make her vision blur. Through the haze of dust and confusion, she heard Lila cry out in pain. "Lila!" Daisy scrambled to her feet, ignoring the burning in her palms where she'd caught herself. Terror seized her heart as she spotted her daughter lying motionless beneath a scatter of fallen metal pieces and broken plastic. "No, no, no!" Daisy rushed to Lila's side, carefully brushing away the lighter debris. Blood trickled from a cut on Lila's forehead, and her right arm lay at an awkward angle. "Baby, can you hear me? Please open your eyes!" The alarms continued their deafening wail as Daisy gathered her unconscious daughter into her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she screamed for help, her voice raw with desperation. "Somebody help us! Please! My baby needs help!" The empty factory floor echoed with her cries, the flashing emergency lights casting grotesque shadows across the wreckage. Daisy rocked back and forth, holding Lila close, praying harder than she'd ever prayed before. "Please, Lord, not my baby, please, not my baby." She could hear distant shouting now. The early shift workers must be arriving. But in that moment, cradling her injured child, Daisy felt completely alone. The same kind of alone she'd felt when they'd told her about Caleb's accident. The same horrible, helpless feeling of watching everything she loved being torn away. "Help!" she screamed again, her voice breaking. "Somebody, please help us!" The sirens continued their relentless shriek as Daisy pressed her cheek against Lila's hair, whispering prayers and promises, waiting for help to arrive. In the chaos of falling debris and flashing lights, she couldn't help but think of Caleb's warnings that had gone unheeded. Now their daughter lay unconscious in her arms, and once, again, the cost of ignored safety concerns would be paid in blood. The emergency room's harsh fluorescent lights cast stark shadows across Daisy's tear-stained face as she watched the medical team work on Lila. Everything moved in a blur of activity. Nurses calling out vital signs, doctors barking orders, machines beeping incessantly. Her baby girl looked so small and fragile on the examination table, surrounded by adults in scrubs and white coats. "Mrs. Lewis?" A gentle voice cut through her daze. "I'm Dr. Samuel Ortiz. We're doing everything we can for your daughter." Daisy nodded numbly, unable to take her eyes off Lila's still form. Will she? Dr. Ortiz's dark eyes held compassion as he guided her to a nearby chair. "We've managed to stabilize her for now, but I need to be honest with you. Lila has sustained severe internal injuries, and there's significant trauma to her brain from the impact." The words hit Daisy like physical blows. She gripped the arms of the chair, her knuckles turning white. "But you can help her, right? You can make her better." "We're going to do everything possible," Dr. Ortiz assured her, his voice steady and calm. "Right now, we're preparing to place her in a medically induced coma to help reduce the swelling in her brain." Hours crawled by like years. Nurses came and went, checking machines, adjusting medications. By evening, Lila lay peacefully in a private room, looking impossibly small in the hospital bed. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided a rhythm to Daisy's quiet prayers. Dr. Ortiz returned as the sun was setting, his face grave. He pulled up a chair beside Daisy and spoke in low, measured tones. "Mrs. Lewis, there's something we need to discuss. There's an experimental surgical procedure that could help Lila. It's shown remarkable results in cases similar to hers." Hope flickered in Daisy's chest. "Then let's do it, whatever she needs." The doctor's expression tightened. "The procedure is extremely expensive. It's not covered by standard insurance because it's still considered experimental. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." The hope in Daisy's chest turned to ice. She thought about her savings account with its meager balance, barely enough to cover next month's rent. How much exactly? The procedure alone would cost $450,000. Dr. Ortiz said quietly. "And that's not including post-operative care." Daisy's vision blurred with fresh tears. The amount might as well have been millions. It was equally impossible. What happens if we can't do the surgery? Dr. Ortiz's silence spoke volumes before he finally answered. Without it, Lila's chances of recovery are very low, and even if she does wake up, she would likely have severe permanent disabilities. The night stretched endlessly as Daisy sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair, her hand resting gently on Lila's. The room was quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors and the soft whoosh of the ventilator helping her daughter breathe. In the darkness, memories of Caleb flooded back, his voice urgent as he explained his concerns about the factory's aging equipment. "They're cutting corners on maintenance, Daisy," he'd said. "Someone's going to get hurt." He'd tried to warn them, filed reports, spoken up in meetings. And then the accident that took his life. An accident that could have been prevented. Now their daughter lay fighting for her life, victim of the same negligence. Daisy's tears fell silently as she stroked Lila's hand. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered. "Your daddy tried to stop this. He tried so hard." The first rays of dawn were creeping through the window when a hospital administrator knocked softly on the door. The woman's face was sympathetic but professional as she explained that they needed payment assurances before they could proceed with any experimental procedures. "We understand this is difficult," the administrator said gently, "but we need to know if you'll be able to arrange payment or if we should look at alternative care plans." Daisy's throat tightened. She knew what alternative care plans meant, keeping Lila comfortable while hoping for the best. The thought was unbearable. As she watched her daughter's chest rise and fall with each assisted breath, Daisy knew there was only one option left. The very thought of it made her stomach churn, but she would walk through fire for her child. She would have to face Kai Blackwood, the man who had dismissed Caleb's warnings, who had chosen profit over safety, who had offered empty condolences after her husband's death, the man whose company's negligence had now put her daughter in this hospital bed. Daisy squeezed Lila's hand gently and leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Mama's going to fix this," she whispered. "I promise you, baby girl, whatever it takes." She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, searching for the number to Blackwood Industries' corporate offices. The sun continued its slow rise outside the window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscenely beautiful against the sterile hospital room. As she waited for the phone to connect, Daisy closed her eyes and prayed for strength. She would need every ounce of courage and dignity she possessed to face Kai Blackwood and ask for his help. But for Lila, she would do anything, even this. The early morning bus lurched through downtown traffic, its metal frame groaning with each stop. Daisy Lewis sat rigid in her seat, clutching her worn purse, her reflection ghostly in the smudged window. She had changed into her best church dress, a simple navy blue number that had seen better days, but still held its dignity. Her mother had always said that clothes were armor, and today Daisy needed all the protection she could get. The towering glass spire of Blackwood Industries grew larger with each block, its presence as overwhelming as the task ahead. Daisy's lips moved silently, practicing the words she'd rehearsed all night. "Mr. Blackwood, I know we've never met, but—" No, too informal. "Mr. Blackwood, I desperately need your help." No, too weak. Nothing sounded right. How did one ask a billionaire to save their child's life? The bus wheezed to a stop at the tower's base. Daisy's legs felt like lead as she descended the steps. Security guards in crisp uniforms watched her approach through the revolving glass doors, their eyes sliding past her as if she were invisible. The lobby stretched out before her, all marble and steel, designed to make visitors feel small. At the reception desk, a young woman with perfectly styled hair barely glanced up from her computer. Can I help you? I need to see Mr. Blackwood. It's urgent. The receptionist's polite smile didn't reach her eyes. Do you have an appointment? No, but I'm sorry, but Mr. Blackwood's schedule is completely full. You'll need to call our corporate offices to arrange a meeting. She slid a business card across the desk. They'll be happy to assist you in 4 to 6 weeks. Daisy's hands trembled. My daughter doesn't have 4 to 6 weeks. Please, I just need 5 minutes. Security can escort you out if necessary. The threat was velvet-wrapped steel. Daisy stood her ground. I'm Daisy Lewis. My husband worked here. Please, just call up and tell Mr. Blackwood. Ma'am, if you have an employee relations issue, you'll need to contact HR. The receptionist's finger hovered over a button Daisy suspected would summon security. Defeat threatened to overwhelm her, but Lila's face flashed in her mind. Taking a deep breath, Daisy stepped back and pretended to leave. Instead, she watched. She noticed how employees flashed badges at turnstiles, how service workers used a separate entrance, how a cleaning cart was left momentarily unattended. 20 minutes later, wearing a borrowed custodial jacket and pushing that same cart, Daisy's heart thundered as she rolled past security. The service elevator required no badge. She pressed the button for the executive floor, level 42, and prayed. The elevator climbed smoothly, each floor bringing her closer to either salvation or humiliation. When the doors opened, Daisy found herself in a hushed corridor of wood paneling and plush carpet. Voices echoed from a conference room, something about quarterly projections and shareholder confidence. A brass nameplate caught her eye. Kai Blackwood, Chief Executive Officer. The door was ajar. Daisy slipped inside, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the cart's handle. The office was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a god's-eye view of the city. Family photos were conspicuously absent from the stark, modern decor. Footsteps approached. Daisy's knees went weak. Kai Blackwood strode in, his attention fixed on a tablet. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early, 40s, with sharp features and the kind of presence that filled a room. He looked up, freezing mid-step. Who are you? How did you get in here? The carefully rehearsed words evaporated. Daisy's legs finally gave out, and she sank to her knees on the expensive carpet. Please, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. My name is Daisy Lewis. My daughter. She's dying. The accident at your factory. She needs surgery we can't afford. I'll do anything you want, anything. Just please save my daughter. Kai's face drained of color at her surname. He set down his tablet with unnaturally careful movements. Lewis, he repeated. You're Caleb Lewis's widow. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Daisy could hear her own ragged breathing, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant wail of a siren 42 stories below. Kai moved to his desk, pressing a button. Cancel my next meeting. His voice was controlled, but Daisy saw his hand trembling slightly. He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. Get up, Mrs. Lewis, please. He gestured to a chair. Tell me about the surgery. Hope flickered as Daisy explained Dr. Ortiz's proposal, the experimental procedure, the astronomical cost. Kai listened without interruption, his face growing more troubled with each detail. When she finished, he stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I'll cover the surgery, he said finally. All of it, but there's a condition. Relief flooded through Daisy so intensely she felt light-headed. Anything, she repeated. Kai turned, his eyes hard. The board is moving to force me out. Recent accidents, falling stock prices, bad press. They say I've lost control. They're probably right. His laugh was bitter. But I can't let them take over. Not now. Not when I'm so close to fixing things. He stepped closer. I need to rehabilitate my image, show stability, family values. The papers love a good romance, especially one with a humanitarian angle. Daisy's relief curdled into dread as understanding dawned. Marry me, Mrs. Lewis, or at least pretend to. Be my fiancé. Let me be the caring CEO who fell in love with a widow, who's providing revolutionary medical care for her injured child. His voice was clinical, as if discussing a business merger. That's my offer. Your daughter's life for your public agreement to become Mrs. Kai Blackwood. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and inescapable. Daisy stared at him. This man who held her daughter's life in his hands and realized with crystal clarity that she had no choice at all. Daisy stumbled backward, her hand flying to her throat. You want me to pretend to marry you? The words felt wrong in her mouth, like stones. Not marry, just an engagement, Kai corrected, his tone businesslike. A carefully managed public relationship that benefits us both. He moved behind his desk, pressing another button. Send in legal, please. Daisy shook her head, tears burning her eyes. This is wrong. You're asking me to lie. I'm asking you to survive, Kai said sharply. He loosened his tie, and for the first time, she glimpsed something like desperation in his controlled demeanor. Do you know what's happening to this company? 3 discrimination lawsuits in the past year, safety violations, stock prices falling. The board thinks I've lost control. And how is a fake engagement supposed to fix that? Kai's laugh was hollow. Image is everything. A CEO in love, showing compassion, caring for a widow and her injured child. The media will eat it up. The board can't touch me without looking heartless. So I'm just a prop. Daisy's voice cracked. You're a solution, Kai corrected, and I'm offering you one in return. Daisy turned away, walking unsteadily toward the door. Her hand was on the handle when her phone rang. The hospital's number flashed on the screen, her hands shaking so badly she could barely answer. Daisy listened as Dr. Ortiz explained that Lila's intracranial pressure was rising. Without intervention soon, the damage could become permanent, or worse. Kai watched her face crumple as she ended the call. Your daughter? He asked quietly. Daisy nodded, unable to speak. Then you know what you have to do. She did. God help her, she did. But she wouldn't surrender completely. I have conditions, Daisy said, straightening her spine. First, the surgery happens immediately. Today. Second, I keep my job. No cushy position, no handouts. Third, this stays an engagement only. No marriage, ever. Kai studied her with something like respect. Agreed. Anything else? Yes. Daisy met his gaze steadily. When this is over, when Lila is better, you tell me the truth about what happened to my husband. The mask slipped for just a moment, and Daisy saw raw pain flash across Kai's face before he could hide it. Agreed, he said hoarsely. The next few hours passed in a blur. Lawyers appeared with contracts. Daisy signed papers she barely understood, her thoughts only on Lila. A PR team swooped in, coaching her on what to say when reporters called. They arranged her hair, touched up her makeup, and took careful photos of Kai slipping an enormous diamond ring onto her trembling finger. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the story had leaked to carefully chosen media outlets. By 4 o'clock, Daisy's phone was ringing constantly with unknown numbers. By 5 o'clock, Dr. Ortiz called to say the surgery was scheduled for first thing tomorrow morning, all arrangements made. As evening fell, a sleek black car delivered Daisy to Kai's estate in the hills above the city. The driver carried her single small suitcase up the winding driveway while Daisy followed, feeling smaller with each step. The house was a modernist masterpiece of glass and steel, all clean lines and soaring spaces. A housekeeper met them at the door, introducing herself as Mrs. Chen. "Your room is ready, Miss Lewis," she said kindly. "Mr. Blackwood asked that you make yourself comfortable. He'll be working late at the office." Daisy followed Mrs. Chen up a floating staircase to a suite larger than her entire apartment. The closet was already filled with expensive clothes in her size. New toiletries lined the bathroom counter. Everything was perfect, coordinated, and completely foreign. After Mrs. Chen left, Daisy sat on the edge of the vast bed, still in her borrowed custodial jacket. She looked down at her hands, one still bearing the calluses of hard work, the other now weighted with a ring worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime. The sun set behind the city spread out below, lights twinkling on like stars. In a hospital somewhere in that glittering expanse, her daughter lay fighting for her life. And here sat Daisy, in a stranger's house, wearing a stranger's ring, about to live a stranger's life. She slipped off the ring and held it up to the fading light. It sparkled magnificently, but cast no warmth. Like everything else in this pristine house, it was beautiful but cold. Nothing here belonged to her. Not the clothes, not the room, not even her own story anymore. Daisy curled up on top of the blankets, still fully dressed, and clutched her phone to her chest, waiting for updates from the hospital. In the growing darkness, she whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for Lila, who deserved so much better than this tangled web of lies her mother was weaving to save her life. Dawn crept into Daisy's room through floor-to-ceiling windows, finding her still curled atop the covers in yesterday's clothes. Her phone showed 5% battery and 3 missed calls from the hospital, all routine updates, thank God. Lila remained stable. A gentle knock startled her. "Ms. Lewis?" Mrs. Chen called softly. "Breakfast is ready, and your schedule begins at 8 o'clock sharp." Schedule? Daisy checked the time. 7:15? She hadn't even found the bathroom supplies yet. 30 minutes later, wearing the simplest outfit she could find in the stuffed closet, a cream sweater and dark pants that probably cost more than her monthly rent, Daisy followed Mrs. Chen to a sun-filled dining room. A woman in her 60s sat reading a newspaper, silver hair swept into an elegant twist. "Ah, you must be Daisy." The woman lowered her paper, revealing kind eyes and patrician features. "I'm Eleanor Blackwood, Kai's aunt. Please join me." Daisy sat awkwardly, hyper-aware of her posture. A server immediately appeared with coffee and what looked like a magazine spread of breakfast options. "Just toast, please," Daisy managed. Her stomach was too knotted for more. Eleanor studied her over the rim of a delicate teacup. "I imagine this is all quite overwhelming." "I'm managing," Daisy said carefully. Well, we'll help you adjust. Patricia will be here at 8 to begin your orientation." As if summoned, a sharp-featured woman in a tailored suit strode in precisely at 8 o'clock, tablet in hand. "Ms. Lewis, I'm Patricia Walsh, your personal coordinator. We have much to cover today." The next 4 hours were a blur of instructions. How to sit, ankles crossed, never legs. Stand, shoulders back, chin lifted. Eat, small bites, frequent pauses. And speak, measured tones, no colloquialisms. Patricia drilled Daisy on acceptable topics for interviews and which reporters to avoid. "Your story is simple," Patricia declared. "You met at a company event 6 months ago, a whirlwind romance. Kai was drawn to your authenticity, you to his vision for positive change. The accident at the factory deeply affected you both, cementing your commitment." Daisy's hands clenched in her lap. Their love story was built on the very tragedy that nearly killed her daughter. After etiquette came wardrobe. A stylist evaluated Daisy like a project, measuring and tutting. "We'll need everything. Day wear, evening wear, casual elegance. The media will be watching every appearance." By early afternoon, Daisy's head spun. She begged a short break, claiming a headache. Instead of resting, she explored, seeking quiet space to think. The third-floor guest wing included a small study. Dusty sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, illuminating built-in bookshelves. Daisy gravitated toward a section of leather-bound volumes. Corporate records, she realized. Her fingers traced spines until a familiar name stopped her cold. Lewis C. Safety Engineering Reports 2018-2019. With trembling hands, Daisy pulled the volume down. Inside were technical documents, maintenance logs, and detailed safety warnings, all in Caleb's precise handwriting. Red flags marked dozens of pages. You found Caleb's work. Daisy whirled to find Eleanor Blackwood in the doorway, watching her with sad eyes. You knew him, Daisy whispered. I knew of him. A brilliant engineer. His death was tragic. Eleanor's pause spoke volumes. What happened to him? Perhaps that's a question for my nephew. Eleanor's tone was gentle but firm. But I will say this. Caleb Lewis was a man of integrity. His reports deserved more attention than they received. Before Daisy could press further, Patricia's voice echoed down the hall. Ms. Lewis, we have a media training session in 10 minutes. The rest of the day passed in a fog of instruction and fittings. As evening fell, Daisy finally escaped to her room, only to hear voices from Kai's nearby study. The board is concerned, a man was saying via speakerphone. This engagement story is helping, but the Lewis situation remains volatile. The situation is contained, Kai replied flatly. Is it? Those buried reports could still surface. If anyone connects them to current events, I said it's handled. Kai snapped. The surgery proceeds tomorrow as planned, contingent on continued cooperation. That's all that matters. Daisy pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Even now, with her daughter's life in the balance, they spoke of Caleb's death as a liability to be managed. Her phone buzzed. The hospital. Dr. Ortiz was direct. The surgery team is confirmed for tomorrow morning, Ms. Lewis, but the hospital requires final payment authorization before we begin. Mr. Blackwood's office mentioned there might be conditions? Daisy closed her eyes, trapped between truth and necessity. Her daughter's life, or justice for her husband's death. An impossible choice, yet no choice at all. Tell them, she whispered. Tell them they have my full cooperation. In her room, the diamond ring caught the last light of day, its sparkle now seeming less like stars and more like tears. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of Blackwood Tower as photographers jostled for position. Daisy stood beside Kai, her hand resting in the crook of his arm, exactly as Patricia had rehearsed with her. The navy blue designer dress felt like a costume, though Patricia had assured her it perfectly balanced approachable with elevated. Mr. Blackwood, over here. The cameras clicked rapidly. Give us the love story. Kai's public smile never wavered. Sometimes life brings unexpected blessings. Daisy has brought a new perspective to both my personal life and our corporate culture. A reporter from the society page raised her perfectly manicured hand. And Ms. Lewis, quite a fairy tale, going from cleaning staff to future Mrs. Blackwood. Some might call it opportunistic. The implication stung, but Daisy remembered Patricia's coaching. Keep smiling, stay poised. She felt Kai's arm tense beneath her fingers. I believe, Daisy said carefully, that real love sees past surface differences. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. But surely the cultural adjustment must be challenging? Another reporter pressed, her tone dripping with condescension. Before Daisy could respond, Kai stepped forward slightly. My fiancée brings grace and authenticity to everything she does. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a charity luncheon to attend. The luncheon proved even more challenging than the press conference. Daisy felt the sideways glances from society women, heard the whispered comments behind designer clutch purses. Clearly a publicity move. Trying to counter those discrimination suits. Probably won't last 6 months. She focused on her water glass, on her perfect posture, on anything but the judgmental stares. Kai worked the room with practiced ease, leaving her to fend off subtle barbs from his social circle. "What a lovely, unique ring," said one woman, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How refreshing to see something so simple." "Thank you," Daisy replied softly. "I find beauty in simplicity." Finally, mercifully, the luncheon ended. In the car, Kai checked emails while Daisy watched the city blur past. They hadn't exchanged a single genuine word all day. "I have meetings all afternoon," he said as they approached the hospital. "Patricia will collect. You at 5 o'clock?" Daisy nodded, already reaching for the door. She barely waited for the car to stop before hurrying inside, heels clicking against sterile floor tiles. In Lila's room, the machines beeped steadily. Daisy kicked off her expensive shoes and curled up in the familiar chair beside the bed. Here, she could finally be herself again. "Hey, baby girl." She stroked Lila's small hand. "Mama's here. I'm sorry I had to leave you this morning." Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. "The doctors are going to help you tomorrow. You just need to stay strong for me, okay?" For hours, Daisy sat with her daughter, alternating between quiet prayers and gentle stories. She sang soft hymns her own mother had taught her, smoothed Lila's hair, and promised over and over that everything would be all right. "Your daddy's watching over you?" she whispered. "He loved you so much, Lila, so much." When Patricia arrived, Daisy kissed Lila's forehead and reluctantly returned to the waiting car. The estate loomed ahead, grand and cold in the evening light. Instead of going to her room, Daisy found herself drawn to the small chapel she'd glimpsed during yesterday's tour. The space was intimate, with warm wooden pews and stained glass windows that caught the setting sun. Daisy sank to her knees, finally letting her tears fall freely. "Lord," she prayed aloud, "give me strength. Help me protect my baby girl, and please, please help me forgive." Her voice broke. "Because right now that feels impossible." She didn't hear the door open, didn't realize she wasn't alone until a floorboard creaked. Kai stood in the doorway, his usual mask of control slipping slightly as he watched her pray. Their eyes met in the dimness. For a moment, Daisy saw something like pain flash across his face. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the silence. Kai answered curtly, his business voice returning. "Yes, schedule the surgery for 7 a.m. tomorrow. Full payment will be transferred tonight." He paused, glancing at Daisy. "And ensure the best surgical team is assembled. Spare no expense." After he left, Daisy remained in the chapel, her tears now mixed with gratitude and lingering bitterness. Tomorrow her daughter would have a chance at life, but the cost was more than just money. It was truth, justice, her very integrity. The stained glass cast colored shadows across her clasped hands, the engagement ring catching fragments of light. In the growing darkness, Daisy continued to pray, for Lila's healing, for guidance, and for the strength to walk this difficult path with grace. The hospital corridors felt different in the pre-dawn darkness. Daisy walked beside Lila's gurney, her hand resting on her daughter's small shoulder. The wheels squeaked softly against the polished floor as they approached the surgical wing. "Mama's right here, baby," Daisy whispered, even though Lila remained in her medically induced sleep. "The doctors are going to make you better." Dr. Ortiz met them at the double doors, his face calm and reassuring in the fluorescent light. "We're ready, Mrs. Lewis. The surgical team is prepped and waiting." Daisy bent down to kiss Lila's forehead one last time. "I love you, sweet girl. Jesus is watching over you." Her voice cracked on the last words. As the doors swung closed behind the gurney, Daisy felt her legs go weak. A nurse gently guided her to the waiting area, pressing a cup of water into her hands. The clock on the wall read 5:45 in the morning. The waiting room was empty except for her. Daisy tried to pray, but the words kept tangling in her throat. Instead, she watched the second hand tick around the clock face, counting each revolution. 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7:15. The sound of expensive shoes on linoleum made her look up. Kai Blackwood stood in the doorway, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, as if he'd dressed in a hurry. "I wanted to check on the progress," he said stiffly, remaining by the door. Daisy nodded, too exhausted for pretense. "They started about an hour and a half ago. Dr. Ortiz said it could take several hours." After a long moment, Kai crossed the room and sat in a chair, leaving 2 empty seats between them. He pulled out his phone but didn't turn it on, just held it like an anchor. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the quiet bustle of hospital staff starting their morning shifts. 8 o'clock came and went. Then 9. "She likes to draw," Daisy said suddenly, surprising herself. "Lila, I mean. She fills whole notebooks with pictures of butterflies and flowers." Kai turned slightly toward her. "Does she want to be an artist?" "A teacher." Daisy smiled faintly. "She says she wants to help other kids learn beautiful things." More silence followed, but it felt less sharp-edged than before. The clock ticked past 10:30. "Caleb used to draw with her," Daisy continued softly. "He'd spend hours at the kitchen table, showing her how to mix colors." She trailed off, remembering those peaceful evenings. Kai's hands tightened around his phone. "Mrs. Lewis, Daisy, about Caleb." The surgery doors opened, and Dr. Ortiz emerged, still in his scrubs. Daisy shot to her feet, heart pounding. "The surgery was successful," he said, and Daisy felt her knees buckle. Kai's hand caught her elbow, steadying her. "However," Dr. Ortiz continued carefully, "the next 24 to 48 hours are critical. We need to monitor her closely as she comes out of sedation and begins to heal." "But she's going to be okay?" Daisy's voice trembled. "We're cautiously optimistic. The procedure went as well as we could have hoped. She's young and strong." He smiled gently. "You can see her in about an hour, once she's settled in recovery." Daisy pressed her hands to her face, tears of relief flowing freely. "Thank you, God," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you." The day passed in a blur of medical updates and quiet vigils by Lila's bedside. As evening approached, exhaustion hit Daisy like a physical wave. She swayed slightly in a chair. "You need rest," Kai said from the doorway, where he'd appeared periodically throughout the day. "I'll have Patricia drive you back to the estate. I can't leave her. The nurses have my direct number. They'll call immediately if anything changes." His voice softened slightly. "You won't help her by making yourself sick." Too tired to argue, Daisy let herself be led to the waiting car. The city lights blurred past as Patricia navigated through traffic. When they reached the estate, Kai surprised her by following her inside. In the grand foyer, Daisy turned to thank him, but the words died on her lips. Kai's face was drawn with an emotion she'd never seen him display before: guilt. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly, "about your husband's safety report." Daisy's heart stuttered. "You knew about it?" "Yes." The word seemed to cost him. "I was newly appointed to the board. The report detailed serious structural issues, recommended immediate shutdowns for repairs." He ran a hand through his usually perfect hair. The costs would have been enormous. The older board members insisted we couldn't risk the shareholders' confidence. So you buried it, Daisy whispered. I told myself it was necessary, that the problems weren't as severe as the report suggested. His voice grew hoarse. 3 months later, there was an accident in Section 7. Your husband was doing maintenance work in Section 7. Daisy finished, her voice hollow. They said it was operator error. It wasn't. Kai met her eyes directly. I've carried that knowledge for 5 years. When I saw your name, when I realized who you were. He stopped, visibly struggling. I convinced myself that paying for Lila's surgery would begin to make amends. But nothing can make this right. Daisy stood very still, feeling the weight of truth settle around her shoulders. No, she agreed quietly. Nothing can bring Caleb back. I'm going to fix this, Kai said suddenly, with an intensity that made her look up. All of it. The factory safety issues, the cover-up, everything. I promise you, Daisy, I will make this right. In the vast foyer, under crystal chandeliers worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime, Daisy looked at the powerful man before her and saw something she never expected, the beginning of redemption. Start with the truth, she said softly. That's what Caleb would have wanted. Daisy sat in the now familiar hospital chair, her hand gently wrapped around Lila's smaller one. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, creating patterns on the crisp white sheets. For 48 hours, she had watched her daughter's peaceful face, waiting for any sign of change. The steady beep of monitors provided a rhythmic backdrop to her quiet prayers. A nurse had just finished checking Lila's vitals, offering an encouraging smile before leaving. Her numbers are looking good, she had said softly. Daisy leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from Lila's forehead. Baby girl, whenever you're ready to wake up, Mama's right here. She hummed softly, an old hymn her own mother used to sing. The words came naturally. Great is thy faithfulness, morning by morning. A slight flutter of movement caught her attention. Daisy held her breath, watching intently as Lila's eyelashes trembled. Then slowly, wonderfully, her daughter's eyes opened. Mama? The word was barely a whisper, but to Daisy it was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Tears spilled down Daisy's cheeks as she pressed the call button for the nurse. Lila's eyes moved around the room, taking in her surroundings with growing awareness. My head feels funny. You had an operation, sweetheart, but you're going to be just fine now. Daisy squeezed her daughter's hand gently. The room quickly filled with medical staff. Dr. Ortiz arrived moments later, his face breaking into a warm smile as he observed Lila tracking movement and responding to questions. Hello there, young lady, he said kindly. You've been quite brave. As the doctor performed his examination, Kai appeared in the doorway. He had been making daily visits, though usually when Lila was sleeping. Now he stood awkwardly, as if unsure whether to enter. Lila noticed him. You're the man from the pictures, she said, her voice still weak but clear. The one helping my mama. Kai stepped into the room, his usual corporate mask softened by surprise. Yes, I'm Kai Blackwood. Mama was worried about the hospital bills. Lila's direct honesty made both adults catch their breath. Thank you for helping us. Something shifted in Kai's expression, a crack in the careful facade he usually maintained. You're very welcome, Lila. Dr. Ortiz finished his assessment with evident satisfaction. Everything looks remarkably good. We'll need to run some tests, but her initial responses are excellent. The news spread quickly. By afternoon, several major networks were running the story. Blackwood Industries CEO's fiancé's daughter awakens after groundbreaking surgery. Reporters gathered outside the hospital, but hospital security kept them at bay. Inside Lila's room, the atmosphere was one of quiet celebration. Nurses brought in a small teddy bear. Kai arranged for Lila's favorite foods to be delivered from the hospital cafeteria. Through it all, Daisy watched her daughter with grateful joy, occasionally catching Kai's eye across the room. As evening approached, Lila drifted off to sleep naturally this time. Kai touched Daisy's shoulder. "You should eat something. The cafeteria's closed, but I know a place nearby." Daisy hesitated, looking at Lila. "The night nurse has my number," he assured her. "We'll be back in an hour." The restaurant was a small, family-owned Italian place, just 2 blocks from the hospital. In a quiet corner booth, away from curious eyes, Daisy realized it was the first time she and Kai had shared a meal alone. "The media coverage has been positive," Kai said, breaking the comfortable silence. "They're calling it a modern fairy tale, the janitor's daughter saved by her mother's employer-turned-fiancé." Daisy set down her fork. "Is that why you're being so kind? For the publicity?" "No." Kai met her eyes directly. "After what I told you about Caleb's report, I expected you to hate me. You would have every right to." "Hate doesn't heal anything," Daisy said softly. "My faith teaches forgiveness. Besides, you're trying to make things right now." "More than you know." Kai leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I've spent the last 2 days reviewing every safety report from the past 5 years. I've found dozens of buried complaints, covered-up incidents." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Daisy had come to recognize as a sign of genuine emotion. "I'm going to expose all of it. The board will fight you. Let them." There was steel in his voice. "I own controlling interest. They can't stop me from telling the truth. They can only try to minimize the damage." He paused. "It will likely tank our stock price. The company might not recover. But lives will be saved." Daisy finished quietly. "Yes." Kai reached across the table, taking her hand. The gesture felt natural, unplanned. "Working with my PR team, playing the corporate game, it all felt necessary, like wearing armor. But watching you these past days, seeing your faith, your honesty—" He squeezed her fingers gently. "You've shown me there's more strength in truth than in all my careful manipulations." Daisy looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch. "When I first agreed to this arrangement, I thought I was entering a cage," she admitted. "But you've surprised me, Kai Blackwood. You've surprised me too." His thumb traced small circles on her palm. "I never expected to find redemption in a janitor's prayers." They sat in comfortable silence, the candle between them casting soft shadows. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, but in their corner of the world, something new and tender was taking root, something built on honesty, strengthened by faith, and opening slowly, carefully, into love. "We should get back to Lila," Daisy said eventually, though she didn't immediately withdraw her hand. "Yes," Kai agreed, but his eyes held hers for a moment longer. In that look was promise, possibility, and the quiet understanding that their arrangement had become something neither of them had expected. Something real. The morning sun barely pierced through the heavy clouds hanging over Blackwood Tower. Daisy stood by the window in her temporary estate bedroom, watching raindrops trace patterns on the glass. Her phone buzzed with yet another news alert, the 5th one since dawn. "Breaking. Blackwood Industries Board calls emergency meeting." She clicked it off, her stomach tightening. After last night's dinner with Kai, hope had bloomed so beautifully. Now reality was crashing in. The first sign of trouble came at 7:15 in the morning. Eleanor Blackwood appeared at her door, tablet in hand, face drawn. "Turn on the financial news," she said without preamble. On the screen, analysts were dissecting leaked documents suggesting major safety violations at Blackwood Industries. The stock was already down 12% in pre-market trading. But it was the crawling headline at the bottom that made Daisy's blood run cold. Sources claim CEO's engagement a PR stunt. Lewis family history raises questions. Eleanor's eyes were sympathetic but direct. The board is moving against Kai. They're freezing everything, including the medical payment channels. Daisy's hand flew to her throat. But Lila's surgery, the aftercare. I know. Eleanor touched her arm. Kai's in emergency meetings. He's trying to stop them. Throughout the morning, the attacks grew worse. Financial networks questioned Kai's leadership. Social media exploded with theories about Daisy's manipulation of the situation. By 11 o'clock, tabloid websites were running old photos of her, claiming she had orchestrated the accident to trap Kai. Daisy tried calling the hospital, but the billing department's response was clinical. "We're experiencing issues with the payment authorization. Please contact your guarantor." At 12:30, she made her way to Kai's home office, needing answers, but voices from inside made her pause at the partially open door. "They're threatening to remove me completely," Kai was saying, his voice strained. "Everything I've built, gone. And they'll still bury the safety issues, just under new management." A pause. "Maybe we could negotiate," another voice suggested. "Release some findings, but not others. Show progress without full exposure." Half-truths. Kai's bitter laugh held no humor. Back to playing the game. Sometimes survival requires compromise. The silence that followed felt endless. Then Kai spoke. Softer now. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I was naive to think—" Daisy stepped back from the door, her heart shattering quietly. The man who had promised truth last night was wavering, caught between conscience and survival. Just like before. Just like with Caleb. She moved through the estate in a daze, muscle memory guiding her up the stairs to her room. The elegant space that had begun to feel almost like home now felt suffocating. She pulled out her small suitcase, the same one she'd arrived with just days ago. Her few belongings went in quickly. The designer clothes they'd bought for appearances stayed in the closet. They weren't really hers anyway. In the bathroom, she stared at her reflection, remembering how she'd stood in this same spot preparing for public appearances, believing maybe, just maybe, this could become real. Foolish, she whispered to her reflection. So foolish. The hospital called at 3:45. Lila was ready for discharge, but there were complications with the billing. Daisy closed her eyes, gathered her strength, and said she'd be there within the hour. She wrote a simple note and left it on the antique desk. "Thank you for trying, but I won't be used to hide the truth again." Daisy. The late afternoon sun was sinking toward horizon when Daisy helped Lila into a taxi outside the hospital. Her daughter was quiet, still weak, but stable enough to travel. "Aren't we going to Mr. Kai's house?" Lila asked softly. Daisy smoothed her daughter's hair, fighting back tears. "No, baby. We're going to stay with Aunt Marie for a while." "But I thought—" Lila's voice trailed off, confusion and disappointment evident in her young face. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," Daisy said carefully. "Sometimes they let you believe in something that isn't quite real." The taxi pulled away from the curb. Through the back window, Blackwood Tower rose against the darkening sky. Beautiful, powerful, and hollow. Just like the promises it had held. Daisy held her daughter close as they drove through the gathering dusk. Her heart was breaking, but her spine was steel. She had survived loss before. She had rebuilt from nothing before. And she would do it again, with dignity intact and faith unshaken. The taxi turned onto the highway, carrying them away from the glittering world that had never truly been theirs. Behind them, storm clouds gathered over the city, but Daisy didn't look back. She had learned long ago that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away. The Red Pine Motel sign flickered weakly in the gathering darkness, its neon glow reflecting off puddles in the cracked parking lot. Room 212 wasn't much, just 2 twin beds, faded wallpaper, and a small bathroom, but it was clean and safe. For tonight, it would have to be enough. Daisy sat on the edge of one bed, carefully helping Lila change into her pajamas. The little girl's movements were still slow and careful, her surgical incisions requiring gentle handling. "Mama?" Lila's voice was small in the quiet room. "Why couldn't we stay at Mr. Kai's house? It was so pretty there." Daisy's hands stilled for a moment as she buttoned Lila's nightshirt. "Sometimes, baby, the prettiest things aren't real, like those plastic flowers in the hospital gift shop. They look nice, but they've got no life in them." "I don't understand." Lila's lower lip trembled slightly. Daisy gathered her daughter close, breathing in the sweet smell of her hair. "You remember what Daddy always used to say about telling the truth? That it matters more than being comfortable." Lila recited carefully. "That's right." Daisy smiled, though her heart ached. "Well, Mr. Kai, he has to make some big choices about telling the truth. And until he does, we need to stand on our own." Thunder rolled in the distance as rain began pattering against window. Daisy tucked Lila into bed, smoothing the thin motel blanket around her shoulders. "Would you like to say our prayers together?" Lila nodded, folding her small hands. They spoke the familiar words softly, their voices joining in the simple ritual that had carried them through so many hard nights. When they finished, Lila's eyes were already growing heavy. "Mama?" she murmured, fighting sleep. "Do you think Mr. Kai will make the right choice?" Daisy stroked her daughter's cheek. "I hope so, baby. I really hope so." Across town, in the vast emptiness of the Blackwood estate, Kai stood at his office window. The same storm that was lulling Lila to sleep cast shadows across his face as lightning illuminated the sky. On his desk lay the morning's newspapers, their headlines screaming accusations and innuendo. But it wasn't the press coverage that haunted him. It was the memory of Daisy's note. 7 simple words that cut deeper than any media attack. "Thank you for trying, but I won't be used to hide the truth again." He picked up his crystal tumbler, studying the amber liquid inside as if it might hold answers. The ice clinked softly as his hand trembled. "I wondered how long it would take you to start drinking again." Eleanor's voice made him turn. His aunt stood in the doorway, her elegant frame straight despite her years, her eyes sharp with disappointment. "Not now, Eleanor." Kai set the glass down untouched. "Yes, now." She moved into the room with quiet authority. "Because you're standing at the same crossroads you faced 5 years ago, when Caleb Lewis first brought you those safety reports." Kai's jaw tightened. "The situation is more complicated than that." "No." Eleanor's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "It's exactly that simple. A good man told you an uncomfortable truth. You chose silence then, and that silence killed him. Now his widow has shown you a path to redemption, and you're hesitating again." "I'll lose everything," Kai said hoarsely. "You're losing everything that matters already." Eleanor moved to the desk, her hand resting on the sealed file marked Lewis C. Safety Assessment Final Report. "Your father built this company on innovation and integrity, but somewhere along the way, profit became more important than people. Caleb tried to stop that slide. Now you have a second chance. Lightning flashed again, throwing Kai's tortured expression into sharp relief. The board can't stop what's right. Eleanor's voice softened. That woman, that remarkable woman, walked away from comfort and security because her integrity matters more than survival. Her child is barely out of surgery, she has nowhere to go, and still she chose truth. She paused. When did you become so afraid of doing the same? Kai turned back to the window, but the storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging in his soul. He could see his reflection in the glass, successful, powerful, respected, and utterly hollow. Behind that reflection, he could almost see Caleb Lewis, the earnest young engineer who had tried to prevent disaster. He saw Daisy's quiet dignity as she endured public scrutiny without complaint. He saw Lila's innocent trust when she thanked him from her hospital bed. The silence is killing you, Eleanor said quietly. It's been killing you since the day you let them bury Caleb's warnings. You can feel it eating away at whatever soul you have left. Kai's hands gripped the window frame. And if I speak now? If I tell everything? Then you might lose your position, your wealth, your social standing. Eleanor's voice held no pity. But you'll save your soul. And isn't that worth more than all the rest? She moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. You know where to find me when you make your decision. The door closed softly behind her, leaving Kai alone with the storm and his conscience. Slowly, he turned from the window. His steps were heavy as he moved to the desk, his hand hovering over Caleb's file. The thunder seemed to hold its breath as his fingers touched the sealed envelope. In that moment, Kai Blackwood stared at the physical embodiment of his greatest moral failure, and finally found his resolve. The morning sun cast long shadows across the motel's worn carpet as Daisy carefully folded Lila's hospital gowns. Her daughter slept peacefully in the narrow bed, still tired from yesterday's follow-up examination. Dr. Ortiz had given them a detailed care plan, complete with referrals to specialists in their hometown 6 hours away. Just a few more things to pack, baby, Daisy whispered, though Lila couldn't hear her. She touched the child's forehead. No fever. Another blessing to count. The small television hummed quietly in the background, its morning news barely audible. Daisy had kept it on more out of habit than interest, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in their temporary home. She glanced at her watch. 8:15 in the morning. The bus wouldn't leave until 2 o'clock, but she wanted everything ready. A knock at the door made her jump. Housekeeping. Just a moment, please. Daisy quickly checked through the peephole before opening the door. The housekeeper, a kind-faced woman named Maria, stood with fresh towels. Oh, Mrs. Lewis. Maria's voice dropped to a whisper when she saw Lila sleeping. I can come back later. No, please, come in. Daisy welcomed her with a tired smile. We're checking out today anyway. Maria's eyes softened with concern as she set down the towels. Where will you go? Home. Daisy's voice held firm. It's time to start fresh. The television's steady murmur suddenly changed tone, catching both women's attention. The morning show host's voice grew urgent. We're interrupting our regular programming for breaking news from Blackwood Industries. Daisy's hands stilled on the folded clothes. The screen showed the magnificent Blackwood Tower, its glass facade gleaming in the morning sun. A crawler at the bottom announced, Emergency shareholders meeting called, Kai Blackwood to address accusations. Maria touched Daisy's arm gently. You should come downstairs to the lobby. The TV there is bigger, and the reception is better. Daisy hesitated, looking at Lila. I'll watch her, Maria offered. I'll call down if she wakes up. After a moment's consideration, Daisy nodded. Thank you. The motel lobby was already crowded when she arrived. Other guests and staff members clustered around the large television mounted above the reception desk. The morning light streamed through the windows, creating a strange contrast with the fluorescent glow of the screen. The camera panned across the Blackwood Industries boardroom. Shareholders filled the seats, their faces tense with anticipation. Several board members sat at the long table, their expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed anger. Then Kai appeared. Daisy's breath caught. He looked different, older somehow, but also more alive. Gone was the careful corporate mask she'd grown to know. Instead, his face held a raw authenticity she'd never seen before. He approached the podium with measured steps, adjusting the microphone with steady hands. The room fell silent. Good morning. His voice filled the lobby through the television speakers. I've called this emergency meeting not to defend accusations or maintain appearances, but to tell the truth. The camera caught several shareholders exchanging worried glances. 5 years ago, Kai continued, a safety engineer named Caleb Lewis submitted a comprehensive report detailing critical safety failures in our manufacturing facilities. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. That report was buried. Mr. Lewis died 3 months later in an accident that his own warnings could have prevented. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. In the motel lobby, someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Kai reached beneath the podium and lifted a thick file. This is the original report, sealed until now. It details not only the technical failures, but the systematic suppression of safety concerns across our facilities. He opened the file, pages clearly visible to the cameras. I was personally informed of these issues. I chose silence. That silence cost a good man his life and endangered countless others. The board members' faces had gone pale. One started to rise, but Kai's voice cut through any potential interruption. Yesterday's accident, which injured a young child, was the direct result of issues first identified in this report. That child's mother, Daisy Lewis, widow of Caleb Lewis, showed me what true integrity looks like. She chose truth over comfort, dignity over advantage. Daisy's hands trembled as she watched. Around her, the lobby had grown absolutely still. Therefore, Kai's voice strengthened. I am releasing all documentation to the proper authorities. I am establishing a victims' compensation fund starting with my personal assets, and I am calling for an independent investigation into all our facilities. One of the board members found his voice. You can't do this. I already have. Kai's reply was quiet but firm. Sometimes the only way forward is through the truth, no matter the cost. He turned to face the cameras directly. To Daisy Lewis, you showed me that integrity isn't negotiable. To the memory of Caleb Lewis, your warnings will finally be heard. And to everyone who has been hurt by our negligence, I am sorry. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Shareholders jumped to their feet, board members shouted, and reporters began firing questions. But Kai stood unmoved at the podium, his face set with quiet resolve. The television feed cut back to stunned news anchors, but in the motel lobby no one moved. The silence felt heavy with the weight of truth finally spoken. Daisy stood perfectly still, tears sliding down her cheeks. Around her, strangers reached out to steady her, offering silent support as they witnessed this moment of justice long delayed. Above them, the television continued its coverage, but Daisy barely heard it. In her mind, she could see Caleb's face the last time he left for work, determined to make things right. She thought of Lila, sleeping peacefully upstairs, finally safe from the dangers her father had tried to prevent. And she thought of Kai Blackwood, who had finally chosen truth over power, conscience over comfort. The morning sun streamed through the lobby windows, catching the tears on Daisy's face and turning them to gold. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city as the impact of Kai's confession rippled through the corporate world. In offices, boardrooms, and newsrooms, phones rang incessantly. Lawyers huddled in conference rooms, their usual measured pace replaced by unprecedented urgency. At Blackwood Industries headquarters, the legal department worked at a fevered pitch. Stacks of documents covered every surface as settlement agreements were drafted, reviewed, and finalized. The public pressure was intense, with social media ablaze and news coverage unrelenting. Daisy sat in her motel room, watching it all unfold on the small television while Lila napped. Every few minutes her phone buzzed with updates from various legal representatives. The speed of the developments made her head spin. "Mrs. Lewis?" A call came through around 2 o'clock. "This is James Morton from the corporate legal team. We've just received confirmation that the first wave of settlements has been approved." Daisy's hand tightened on the phone. "Already?" "Yes, Ma'am. The board couldn't risk further public backlash. They're settling everything. Workers' compensation claims, safety violation penalties, personal injury suits. All of it." Outside her window, clouds drifted across the afternoon sky as Morton explained the details. The numbers he quoted seemed unreal. Millions of dollars in compensation, penalties, and restitution. But it was the next announcement that brought tears to her eyes. "The board has approved the creation of the Caleb Lewis Safety and Justice Fund," Morton said, his voice softening. "It's being established with an initial endowment of $50 million. The fund will support workplace safety initiatives, whistleblower protections, and assistance for families affected by industrial accidents." Daisy closed her eyes, remembering Caleb's voice as he'd pored over his safety reports late into the night. "He would have been proud," she whispered. "There's more." Morton continued. "Mr. Blackwood insisted that your family's portion be handled separately and immediately. He's personally guaranteed Lila's medical care, past, present, and future, with no conditions or limitations." On the bed, Lila stirred slightly in her sleep. Daisy watched her daughter's peaceful face, marveling at how much had changed in just a few hours. The afternoon wore on, bringing more news with each passing hour. Around 4 o'clock, every major news network broke the story simultaneously. Kai Blackwood had resigned as CEO of Blackwood Industries. The footage showed him leaving the corporate headquarters, surrounded by reporters. Despite the chaos, he looked calm, almost relieved. "Leadership requires accountability," he told the cameras. "I failed in that accountability once. I won't fail again." As evening approached, Daisy received an official packet of documents via courier. Her hands trembled as she opened the thick envelope. Inside, she found detailed paperwork confirming everything. Lila's medical trust, compensation for Caleb's death, and their portion of the settlement funds. But it was a handwritten note, tucked among the legal papers, that finally broke her composure. In Kai's precise handwriting, it read, "This isn't charity. It's justice. Your faith showed me the difference." Daisy sank into the chair by the window, tears flowing freely now. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, reminding her of countless evenings spent praying for this very moment. Though she'd never imagined it quite like this. She glanced at Lila, still sleeping peacefully, then back at the papers that represented not just security, but vindication. All those nights Caleb had worked late, all his concerns and warnings, they weren't in vain after all. Moving quietly to avoid waking Lila, Daisy knelt beside the bed. Her tears fell silently as she began to pray, words of gratitude flowing from her heart. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, "for bringing truth to light. Thank you for justice that replaces charity. Thank you for changing hearts and healing wounds." The room grew darker as the sun set, but Daisy remained in prayer, her heart full of gratitude. She thanked God for Caleb's courage, for Lila's healing, for Kai's transformation. Most of all, she gave thanks for the power of truth, how it could pierce through layers of power and privilege, how it could transform lives and heal old wounds. As night settled over the city, Daisy's prayers continued, filled with gratitude for truth's final victory. The simple motel room had become a sanctuary of thanksgiving, where justice had finally replaced charity, and where truth had ultimately prevailed. In the growing darkness, Lila slept on peacefully, while her mother remained in prayer, her heart overflowing with gratitude for truth's healing power and justice's final triumph. 6 weeks passed like gentle waves, each day bringing small but steady changes. The crisp autumn air carried hints of approaching winter as Daisy and Lila settled into their new apartment. Nothing fancy, but clean and bright, with 2 bedrooms and windows that caught the morning sun. Lila's recovery progressed steadily under Dr. Ortiz's watchful care. 3 times a week, Daisy would take her daughter to physical therapy, watching with tears of joy as Lila grew stronger. The child who had once lain motionless in a hospital bed now walked with increasing confidence, though she still tired easily. "Look, Mama," Lila called out one morning, standing at their small kitchen counter. "I can reach the cups all by myself now." Her triumphant smile illuminated the room, and Daisy hugged her daughter close, grateful for each small victory. Their new life wasn't luxurious, but it was stable. The settlement funds had been carefully invested, providing them with modest but secure income. Daisy had insisted on maintaining their simple lifestyle, wanting to teach Lila the value of humility and purpose. "We don't need a big house," she explained to Lila one evening as they shared dinner at their small table. "What matters is that we're together, and we're doing what's right." As October turned to November, Daisy found herself increasingly involved in workplace safety advocacy. It started small, speaking at a local union meeting, sharing her story with other families affected by industrial accidents. But her quiet strength and genuine compassion resonated with people, and soon she was being invited to speak at safety conferences and worker rights events. My husband Caleb knew the truth, she would tell her audiences, her voice soft but carrying conviction. He knew that every worker deserves to come home safely to their family. Now it's our job to make sure his dream becomes reality. She established regular meetings at the community center, creating a support network for families affected by workplace accidents. Every Thursday evening, people would gather to share their stories, offer comfort, and work together for change. The group grew steadily, drawing strength from Daisy's gentle leadership and unwavering faith. Lila would often accompany her mother to these meetings, sitting quietly with her coloring books while the adults talked. Sometimes she would look up and smile at someone who seemed particularly sad, offering them a crayon or a sheet of paper. Small gestures that often brought tears to eyes hardened by loss and struggle. Meanwhile, Kai Blackwood had retreated from the public eye. No more press conferences or television appearances. Instead, he worked quietly behind the scenes, meeting with families affected by corporate negligence. Eleanor, his aunt, occasionally updated Daisy on his activities. "He's different now," Eleanor shared during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "He spends hours with these families, listening to their stories, making sure they have what they need. Not just money, real help, real support." Reports filtered through various channels about Kai's work. He had established a network of legal advocates to help victims navigate complex corporate systems. He funded safety training programs and supported independent workplace monitoring initiatives. But he did it all quietly, without fanfare or public recognition. 3 months after the shareholders' meeting that had changed everything, Daisy received an envelope in the mail. The address was handwritten in Kai's precise script, but it bore no return address. Inside, she found several pages of careful handwriting. "Dear Daisy, I've started this letter 100 times, always falling short of what needs to be said. Words seem inadequate when measured against the weight of past actions and their consequences. I won't ask for forgiveness. That's not the purpose of this letter. Instead, I need to acknowledge the truth, to put into words what should have been said long ago. I knew about Caleb's safety reports. I saw the evidence, understood the risks, and chose silence because I believed it was necessary for survival. I told myself that business sometimes requires difficult choices, that one voice shouldn't derail an entire system. I was wrong, completely, utterly wrong. Your faith showed me what real courage looks like. It's not about maintaining power or protecting systems. It's about standing firm in truth, even when that truth costs everything. Caleb understood this. You live it every day. The changes happening now in workplace safety, the families being helped, the systems being reformed, none of this erases what happened. I know that. But I want you to know that your example, your unwavering commitment to truth and dignity, has created ripples that continue to spread. I think often of Lila's smile that day in the hospital, how she thanked me without knowing the full story. Children see truth so clearly, don't they? She has your heart, fierce and gentle all at once. The work I'm doing now isn't atonement, nothing could be. It's simply what should have been done all along. Every family I meet, every story I hear, reinforces what you taught me. That truth matters more than power, that justice must replace charity, that real change begins with acknowledging wrong. I won't burden you with updates about my life or requests for connection. You've given more than enough. I simply wanted you to know that your example continues to guide this work, that Caleb's courage wasn't wasted, that truth does prevail. With deepest respect and gratitude, Kai Blackwood Daisy sat with the letter for a long time, watching the late afternoon sun cast shadows across her modest living room. From her bedroom, she could hear Lila humming softly as she played with her toys, a sound that never failed to fill her heart with gratitude. The letter felt like the closing of a circle, not an ending, but a recognition of truth's power to transform. She carefully folded the pages and placed them in her Bible, between the pages where she had once pressed the hospital bracelet from Lila's surgery. Outside, the November wind rustled through nearly bare trees, carrying away the last of autumn's leaves. But inside, in their simple home filled with love and purpose, Daisy felt the warmth of truth's victory, not in grand gestures or public declarations, but in the quiet acknowledgement of wrong and the steady work of making things right. The small church sat nestled between oak trees, their branches now heavy with spring buds. Morning sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colourful shadows across worn wooden pews. Daisy sat in her usual spot, 5 rows from the front, right side, smoothing Lila's dress as the 8-year-old coloured quietly in her children's Bible. The familiar scent of old hymnals and fresh flowers filled the air as congregation members filtered in, exchanging warm greetings and gentle hugs. This was their sanctuary, not just a building but a community that had supported them through the darkest days of Lila's recovery. "Look, Mama," Lila whispered, holding up her drawing of Noah's Ark. "I made the elephants purple." Daisy smiled, touching her daughter's cheek softly. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." She marveled at how far they'd come. Lila's recovery had been slow but steady. Physical therapy twice a week had strengthened her legs, and though she still tired easily, her spirit remained bright as ever. The organist began playing the opening hymn, and Daisy reached for her hymnal. That's when she noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the slight turning of heads, the whispered murmurs. She didn't need to look back to know what had caused it. Kai Blackwood had entered the church. He moved quietly, choosing a seat in the last row. No entourage, no expensive suit, just a man in simple clothes, head slightly bowed. Some congregation members stared, others purposefully looked away. But the ripple of his presence was undeniable. Daisy kept her eyes forward, focusing on the familiar words of "Amazing Grace" as the congregation rose to sing. Lila's sweet voice joined in, slightly off-key but full of joy. The service continued, prayers, scripture readings, more hymns. Pastor Richardson delivered a sermon about forgiveness and new beginnings, though Daisy wondered if he'd known Kai would be there. Throughout the service, she never looked back, but she felt Kai's presence like a weight in the room. Not oppressive, just there, real, human. When the final hymn ended and the benediction was given, people began to move about, sharing weekly news and making lunch plans. Lila tugged at Daisy's sleeve. "Can I go say hi to Sarah? She got a new puppy." Daisy nodded, watching as her daughter carefully made her way to her friend near the front of the church. She began gathering their things, Bible, purse, Lila's coloring supplies, when she felt someone approach. "Daisy." His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. She turned slowly, facing Kai for the first time in months. He looked different. Thinner, perhaps, with touches of grey at his temples that hadn't been there before. His eyes held a humility she'd never seen during their previous encounters. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said softly. "I've been wanting to come for weeks, but—" He glanced around the nearly empty church. "I wasn't sure I had the right." Daisy studied him for a moment. "This is God's house," she replied simply. "Everyone has the right to be here." Kai nodded, his hands clasped in front of him like a schoolboy. Would you be willing to talk? Just for a moment?" She gestured to the pew, and they both sat, leaving space between them. Through the open doors, they could hear children laughing on the church steps, including Lila's distinctive giggle. "I know my letter didn't say everything that needed saying," Kai began, "and I know words alone can't undo what happened. But I needed to tell you in person how deeply sorry I am for everything. For Caleb, for putting you in that impossible position, for trying to buy truth with money and manipulation." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to want to see me again after today. But I needed you to know that meeting you, seeing your faith in action, it changed everything. The work I'm doing now with the families, the safety reforms, it's not enough, but it's real. And it started with you standing firm in truth." Daisy sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Through the stained glass, a beam of blue light fell across her face, reminding Kai of the first time he'd seen her pray in his estate's chapel. "The truth," she said finally, "is that I've been angry for a long time. Not just at you, but at a world where power can silence justice so easily. Where my husband's death could be swept aside like it didn't matter. Where I had to choose between my dignity and my daughter's life." She turned to face him fully. "But I've also seen change. Real change. The families being helped, the new safety protocols, the accountability measures. It doesn't erase the past, but it matters." Lila's voice carried from outside, calling to her mother about Sarah's puppy. Daisy smiled slightly, then looked back at Kai. "I can't offer you easy forgiveness or instant friendship," she said honestly. "That wouldn't be real, and we've both had enough of pretending. But," she paused, considering her words carefully, "I'm willing to talk again. On my terms. In my time." Kai nodded, relief and understanding mixing in his expression. "That's more than I deserve," he said quietly. "Thank you." They stood, the space between them still present, but somehow less charged than before. Lila came bounding up the aisle, her dark curls bouncing. "Mama, Can Sarah come over next weekend? And Mr. Blackwood." Her face lit up with recognition. "Are you here to pray too?" "Yes." Kai answered simply. "I am." Daisy touched her daughter's shoulder. "We need to get going, sweetheart. Say goodbye." "Goodbye, Mr. Blackwood." Lila waved cheerfully, already turning towards the door. Kai watched them gather their belongings, not moving to help, respecting the boundaries Daisy had set. As they reached the church steps, Daisy turned back briefly. "Next Sunday," she said. "After service. We can talk more then." It wasn't a promise of redemption or reconciliation. It was something simpler and perhaps more valuable, an opportunity for truth to continue its quiet work of transformation, one careful conversation at a time. The weeks following that first Sunday conversation unfolded like gentle rain after drought. Each meeting brought small drops of understanding, slowly softening the hard ground between them. The second Sunday, they sat in the church garden after service. Lila played with friends nearby while Daisy and Kai talked about Caleb. Really talked, without agenda or defense. Kai shared the weight he'd carried since ignoring those safety reports. Daisy described the man Caleb had been: dedicated father, loving husband, someone who believed in making things better. He used to say that every person deserved to come home safe to their family. Daisy said softly, watching Lila chase butterflies. It wasn't about politics or profit for him. It was about people. Kai nodded, his hands clasped tightly. That's why we've restructured the entire safety program. Every decision now goes through a committee that includes workers, union representatives, and family members. No single person can override concerns anymore. The third Sunday, they walked to a nearby diner after service. Lila skipped ahead, chattering about her Sunday school lesson. Over coffee and pie, Kai talked about the families he was working with, not as statistics or legal obligations, but as people with stories and struggles and dreams. Maria Rodriguez's youngest just started college. He shared. The foundation is covering tuition, but more importantly, she's studying industrial safety engineering. She wants to prevent what happened to her father. Daisy smiled, watching Lila carefully color her paper placemat. That's real change, the kind that ripples forward. By the fourth Sunday, their conversations had evolved into action. Kai mentioned a community center needed volunteers for their after-school program. The following Wednesday found all three of them sorting donated books and helping children with homework. Lila proved to be a natural helper, showing younger kids how to sound out words just as her mother had taught her. Watching her, Kai felt a familiar ache, not of guilt this time, but of hope. "She's so much like you," he told Daisy as they organized shelves. "That same quiet strength." Daisy shook her head but smiled. She's her own person, getting stronger every day. The volunteer work became a regular part of their weeks. Sometimes they served meals at the shelter. Other times they helped at community cleanup events. Kai worked alongside everyone else, not as a former CEO, but as just another pair of hands. One Saturday morning in the community garden, Lila tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Kai, can you help me plant these flowers? They're too heavy." He knelt beside her, showing her how to dig the right-sized hole. "Like this, see? Not too deep, but enough to hold the roots." "Like how God holds us?" Lila asked, patting soil around a bright marigold. Kai glanced at Daisy, who was working nearby. She met his eyes with understanding. "Yes," he said softly. "Exactly like that." As weeks turned to months, their Sunday talks grew longer. Sometimes they discussed scripture, Kai asking honest questions, Daisy sharing her faith without pressure. Other times they talked about everyday things, Lila's progress in school, community needs, hopes for the future. One rainy Sunday in early autumn, they sat in the church fellowship hall after a potluck dinner. Lila had fallen asleep on a nearby pew, her breathing soft and steady. "I've been thinking," Kai said quietly, "about what matters most in life. For years, I thought it was power, control, having all the answers. But watching you these past months, your faith, your integrity, the way you love Lila, it's shown me what real strength looks like." Daisy listened, her hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee. "I'm not the man I was," he continued. "That person died the day you walked into my office, though it took me too long to admit it. The man I am now—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The man I am now knows that wealth means nothing without worth. That power is empty without purpose. That love, real love, is about service and truth, not control." He turned to face her fully, his eyes holding no trace of their old calculation. "Daisy, I'm not asking as Kai Blackwood, former CEO. I'm asking as just Kai, the man who's learning to plant flowers with your daughter and serve meals at the shelter and trust in something bigger than himself. Would you be willing to think about a future together?" The question hung in the air between them, as honest as a prayer. Through the windows, evening light painted the hall in soft gold, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, painting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden pews. Daisy Lewis sat between her daughter Lila and Kai Blackwood, their shoulders touching lightly as the congregation rose for the opening hymn. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The familiar words washed over them as Daisy glanced down at Lila, who was earnestly trying to follow along in the hymnal. At 8 years old, she still struggled with some of the bigger words, but her finger traced each line carefully, just as Daisy had taught her. Kai's deep voice joined in beside them, no longer hesitant as it had been in those first few Sundays. He had learned the rhythms of worship gradually, with the same patience he now applied to everything in his new life. As they sat down for the sermon, Daisy's mind drifted back to that desperate morning, almost 1 year ago, racing into Blackwood Tower, ready to sacrifice everything to save her daughter. She remembered the hollow feeling in her chest as she'd agreed to a false engagement, the way her wedding ring had seemed to burn against her skin as she'd slipped it into her pocket. But desperation hadn't led to ownership, as she'd feared. Instead, it had carved a path to truth, painful, costly truth that had transformed them all. Pastor Johnson's voice carried through the sanctuary. Sometimes our greatest trials become our greatest blessings, not because of the pain they bring, but because of how they strip away everything except what matters most. Daisy felt Kai's hand find hers, his fingers intertwining with quiet certainty. Gone was the cold corporate titan who had tried to buy her dignity. In his place sat a man who had learned to kneel, in prayer, in service, in honest love. Lila leaned against her mother's arm, drawing stick figures in the margins of the church bulletin. They were 3 people now: a teacher's aide who had once been a janitor, a former CEO who now volunteered at soup kitchens, and a little girl who had taught them both about grace. The morning light shifted, touching Lila's face. The surgical scars had faded to thin silver lines, visible only if you knew where to look. She was fully recovered now, running and playing like any other child. But there was a depth to her young eyes that spoke of wisdom beyond her years. "And now," Pastor Johnson continued, "we come to the table of communion, remembering that we are all equal before God, rich and poor, strong and weak, broken and healing." As they moved forward to receive the bread and cup, Daisy remembered another Sunday months ago, when Kai had first asked about their future. She hadn't answered right away. Some truths needed time to grow, like the flowers they planted together in the community garden. But love had bloomed anyway, nurtured by shared purpose and tested faith. It wasn't the fairy tale romance the media had once fabricated. It was better, real, rooted in service and understanding. The final hymn began, and Lila's clear voice joined, in with childhood enthusiasm. "This is my story, this is my song, praising my Saviour all the day long." Daisy squeezed Kai's hand, remembering how far they'd come. He no longer lived in the massive estate that had once imprisoned her. The money from selling it had gone to the Workers' Foundation, funding safety improvements and education programs. Their new home was modest, a comfortable 3-bedroom house with a small garden where Lila grew tomatoes and marigolds. As the service ended, they gathered their things slowly, exchanging warm greetings with other members of the congregation. These people had become true friends, accepting them not for wealth or status, but for who they were becoming together. "Ready to go home?" Kai asked, helping Lila with her jacket. Home. Such a simple word, but it meant something different now. Not a showcase of power or a fortress of isolation, but a place of belonging. They stepped out of the church together into the bright morning sunshine. The air was crisp with early autumn, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and new beginnings. Lila skipped ahead a few steps, then turned back to beam at them both. Daisy breathed deeply, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She wasn't rich, not in the way the world measured wealth. But she was whole. Her dignity wasn't something to be bargained away. It was a gift to be shared in love. Her faith, once tested by tragedy and desperation, now flowed freely, strengthened by truth rather than broken by compromise. Kai's arm slipped around her waist, a gesture of support rather than possession. They watched Lila twirl in the sunshine, her shadow dancing on the church steps. This was freedom, not the absence of struggles or the abundance of wealth, but the presence of authentic love and the courage to live in truth. The church bells began to ring, their clear tones carrying across the Sunday morning quiet. Lila ran back to grab both their hands, tugging them forward into the light. Together they walked down the steps, not as characters in some corporate drama or social scandal, but as a family finding its way home, whole, dignified, and free. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and fresh paint as Daisy Lewis stood before the newly renovated Community Safety Center. Her fingers traced the bronze plaque mounted near the entrance, reading the simple but powerful words, "The Caleb Lewis Memorial Safety Center, where truth protects life." Afternoon sunlight caught the polished surface, and for a moment Daisy saw her own reflection overlaid with the engraved letters of her late husband's name. The building itself wasn't fancy, just a solid 2-story structure with clean lines and welcoming windows. But its purpose made it beautiful. "Mom, come see what they did with the playground." Lila's voice rang out with the kind of carefree joy that only complete healing could bring. Her daughter darted across the freshly laid mulch, her sneakers kicking, up wood chips as she climbed the new, safety-certified equipment. Watching her daughter's healthy movements, Daisy felt a familiar surge of gratitude. The surgical scars had faded to fine silver lines, barely visible now. But more importantly, the light in Lila's eyes had returned brighter than ever. People began arriving for the dedication ceremony, factory workers in their clean weekend clothes, families with children, community leaders, and safety advocates. They gathered in small groups, talking and laughing, some carrying dishes for the potluck that would follow. Kai Blackwood arrived without fanfare, driving his modest sedan rather than the luxury cars he once favored. He parked in the back lot and immediately began unfolding chairs from the storage room, setting them up in neat rows on the grass. His sleeves were rolled up, his movements purposeful, but humble. "Need any help with those?" A former factory worker called out to him. "Thanks, Mike. That would be great." Kai responded, his smile genuine and easy. There was no trace of the coldly calculating CEO he had once been. Months of volunteer work, serving meals, teaching safety classes, mentoring at-risk youth, had transformed him in ways money never could. Daisy watched as he worked alongside others, noting how naturally he fit into this community now. He paused often to chat with people, remembering names, asking about families, listening more than speaking. His wealth remained, but it had become a tool for service rather than power. As the ceremony time approached, more neighbors arrived. Sarah Chen, who had lost her husband in the same accident that claimed Caleb, brought her famous dumplings. Robert Martinez, now heading the Workers' Safety Committee, carried a stack of updated training manuals. Each person represented a piece of healing, a step toward something better. Mrs. Lewis? A small group of current factory workers approached Daisy. We wanted to thank you. The new safety protocols, they're really making a difference. Daisy smiled warmly. Thank you, but this is about all of us, about speaking up and standing firm. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. No corporate banners or press cameras, just honest words from people who understood the cost of silence and the value of truth. When Lila helped unveil the plaque, her small hands pulling the cloth away with pride, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. As sunset approached, the gathering took on a more relaxed tone. Children played on the new equipment, while adults shared food and stories. Kai found his way to Daisy's side, not claiming or demanding, just present. The Safety Instructor Certification Program starts next week, he said quietly. Full scholarships for anyone who wants to learn. Daisy nodded, watching Lila show another little girl how to use the climbing wall properly. Caleb would have loved that, teaching others to protect life. I think about him often, Kai admitted. About how different things might have been if I'd listened years ago. But you're listening now? Daisy responded, touching his arm gently. And acting on what you hear. The sun was setting in earnest now, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. People began gathering their dishes and children, heading home with waves and calls of goodbye. Lila came running back, her cheeks flushed with play and happiness. Ready to head home? Daisy asked, smoothing her daughter's wind-blown hair. Can we walk? It's so pretty out. Lila pleaded. They set off together down the tree-lined street, Lila between them, holding both their hands. The evening air was cool but not cold, carrying the honest scent of autumn. Their shadows stretched long behind them, merging and separating with their steps. Daisy felt the peace of the moment settle deep in her soul. The past wasn't erased, it never could be, but it had finally found rest. Truth had made way for healing, and service had built bridges stronger than guilt or obligation ever could. As they walked, Lila swung their joined hands, humming a song from Sunday school. Ahead lay home and dinner and ordinary evening routines. But in the simplicity of those things lay their greatest victory, the freedom to live authentically, to love without contracts, to serve without spotlight. The last rays of sunlight caught the autumn leaves, turning them to gold above their heads. They walked on together, three people bound not by tragedy or necessity, but by choice and faith and hard-won understanding. Their future wasn't guaranteed perfect, but it was honest and hopeful. And that made all the difference. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.